And I know on the screen, you might see two screens with Professor Ngeba. One of them, it will be another guest, and that will be Bishop Tulani Msomi. So don't be surprised by that. So, Norma, if we can take us through the first part, would really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you so much, Prof. Mashabela. Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to greet the panelists, the experts, university community, and participants. I welcome you to this critical engagement looking at COVID-19 vaccine rollout strategy and the role of traditional and the role of traditional medicine practitioners. South Africa has begun the rollout of COVID-19, as you all know, vaccinations, especially with the healthcare workers, as well as now we are the community, the wider community is actually vaccinating, especially the over 60 years and older citizens have been invited to visit vaccination sites, as long as obviously they are registered. So you might also want to encourage any members of your family to who are within that age group to get their jabs. I think we're also aware that vaccination is actually not compulsory, but people are encouraged to consider it for their safety and the safety of those around them. So, as the facilitator said, we have a fantastic panel with us this afternoon who are going to actually unpack what is currently happening within the country. And also, we're going to hear from our students. We're also going to hear from the side of Department of Health as well as our academic who is also with us, as well as somebody who's going to speak on behalf of the traditional practitioners. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about this because obviously the panel will go through will actually focus on this discussion. So it's been, I've been watching the second phase rollout program across all the provinces. It was satisfying to note that a message of observing health and safety protocols was communicated at all times. So let's continue to observe all these health protocols, regardless of we are going to be vaccinated or not. Again, I would like to extend a special welcome to our panelists, Dr. Fikile Ndlovu, Bishop Tulani Msomi, Professor Ngeba Ngaleni, and lastly, our medical student, Mr. Mohammed Solomon. So they will be introduced a bit later. So I'll now I would like to hand over now to our facilitator. But before I do that, let me introduce him quickly. Professor Musa Mashabela, who is no stranger to COVID-19 related matters, is currently our acting Deputy Vice Chancellor of Research and Innovation. His research portfolio is implementing science and health systems research, which cuts across multiple disciplines and seeks to improve access, quality, and equity in healthcare in ways appropriate for resource-poor settings in sub-Saharan Africa. He was, until recently, the convener of COVID-19 response team at the University of KwaZulu-Natal and is in an advisory capacity to the Department of Health and Department of Health in KwaZulu-Natal and nationally through the technical working group of the Ministerial Advisory Committee. Further, he is also the chairperson of the Standing Committee of Health in the Academy of Science of South Africa and chairperson of the subcommittee to evaluate and report on the national health sector response to COVID-19 in South Africa. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to hand over to our facilitator, who is going to take us through the session this afternoon. Over to you, Prof. Mashabela. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to host this webinar, colleagues. The topic is very important. We are in the process of rolling out a number of sites in the whole country in order to ensure access to vaccines. However, the question still remains as to if we are going to do this as all of society, what would be the different roles of various members of the society? And these need to be made very clear. We know about sites, but we're not sure exactly who does what. We understand that there may have been several discussions that have taken place, but we don't know the extent to which those discussions have translated into practical measures. Opportunities are there, but we need to think about how to engage in those opportunities. I'd therefore like to invite the panel to engage us here, both in terms of what is currently happening, but also in terms of what is possible. So without wasting any time, let me invite Dr. Fikile Ndlovu, who is working at the Office of the Premier in the province of KwaZulu-Natal as the Deputy Director General for the Provincial Strategic Management Branch in the Office of the Premier. And she's a medical doctor, has been working in terms of policy and evaluation, mostly around oversight in the province for a long time. So we don't really expect her to talk to us about issues of implementation because she's not functioning at an operational level, but very importantly, she deals with issues of strategy and planning and evaluation and accountability. So I'm hoping that she will give us a sense of what the situation is in the province, what the thinking is, and then we can then begin to engage from there. Dr. Ndlovu has a lot of experience in government and in terms of governance. And you would have heard about this Operation Sukuma Sake that she was in charge of, which is a multi-sectoral approach. And for that reason, she's very well versed with bringing people from different sectors. And this is really what we want to explore, using this position of traditional health practitioners as a focus in this webinar. So Dr. Ndlovu, please introduce your topic and take us through it. And let's see whether you have some ideas and way forward in answering this complex question for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Mochabela. Thank you to Ms. Zondo, and good afternoon to the panelists and the rest of the participants that are here. I do want to start by saying thank you for this opportunity to engage. I think it's for any pandemic or any disaster that you face, at the core of it is the issue of communication and engagement, which I think for us as we start to roll out the vaccine in the second phase, these engagements have to be strengthened. So really, I appreciate to be here today. And I've titled the talk as the COVID-19 vaccination rollout. And I provide the background, the phase 2. I do touch on the implementation in phase 2, purely from the side of saying we are aware of the plan and what needs to be done and the monitoring that will go on it. I do touch a bit on the electronic vaccine data system registration, which is very important as a tool. But we also would want to talk about it as a tool that does require a bit more because it's a tool that can only be accessed by those who have resources and governance. I speak about it at a high level, and then I come saying I work for the Office of the Premier. So ours is really responsible for the strategic side of saying where are we going around the issue of vaccine rollout. So we have been working in this area, being the center of governance. So we are responsible for ensuring that there are coordinating structures, which in this province is your provincial command council led by the Premier himself. But we've also rolled out those coordinating structures at a district level, where there are district command councils that are looking at the entire response, not just the health response. the response in terms of health, in terms of economy, in terms of education, in terms of governance, in terms of communication, and the monitoring and ensuring that the response is giving us the results. So even the vaccine rollout is falling under that perspective. It doesn't sit outside that entire governance structure. So I think it's something that I want to emphasize. And it is important when we are discussing where there are traditional health practitioners here, where we are saying that is the space where we plug our response in totality. And these are chaired by Premier, the province, the mayors. We have deployed our MECs and our HODs into the districts to go and support the response. And it's within what is called OSS and the district development model. We did not look at the response outside the normal institutional arrangements that are there. And this was just one area that needed to, that multi-sectoral response. And I think COVID, as you indicate, it's actually teaching us on some of our failures and some of the lessons that we should be learning. And I think that is the response. So I'm speaking from that perspective. I did want to say, why am I saying that? It's because whilst I would have the entire understanding, but when it comes to the nitty-gritty of the operations, I may not be able to attend to that. So I touch on the broader plan, which is important as we are looking at that. We know that the vaccine rollout was supposed to start at the beginning of the year through the AstraZeneca vaccine, which then from the research perspective, it turned out that we were not going to win on that thing. So we went then straight to the first phase using the J&J vaccine, which was rolled out in part with the National Department of Health and the Medical Research Council, the Sisonke study. From February. At this point, the 55% of the public and the private healthcare workers have been vaccinated under the study. I think that is very important. That is very important for us because it allows us to know that we now have a gap of a 45% in terms of the response on what we now need to deliver. But looking at the scale of what we are now delivering, we are confident that we will have covered all those who are eligible by the end of the month. Phase 2 commenced on the 17th of May for those who are over 60 years and above. And we are using the Pfizer vaccine, which, as we understand, it requires that cold storage, which is not necessarily available in the rural settings, which therefore brings another dynamic in terms of this rollout that has already started. That means the concentration of the rollout sites are mainly in the urban areas where we are able to accommodate the issue of the storage. Vaccines have been allocated and they are allocated the EVDS and as a way to roll out. And the rollout is both in the health facilities and outside the health facilities in the community sites that have been set out. Now, in the second phase, if we understand that we are starting with senior citizens, what we term senior citizens, this province is estimated to have 955,000 of those. So we are targeting, therefore, in this phase, a group of people who are over 60 and 9,000 of them. The registration that has gone so far, we have not reached more than 20% of those, and we are targeting those in old age homes, senior citizens club, CCMDD. There's a big drive of looking at the registration outside the facilities and really getting that part. And this is another area that if we are talking about the role of stakeholders, this is one area which we really need to harness our stakeholders to assist us in ensuring that we don't miss a single person. The rest of the phase 2, it's only open for now for those who are over 60. Obviously, we are carrying on with the rest of the healthcare workers because it's running parallel. But we will be opening, the next will be the vulnerable with comorbidities and also the essential services, in particular, those who are in occupational health and safety space. As I had indicated that there are sites both in rural and urban, they are also dependent on the density. So you see that the massive big sites are the ones where we have dense populations, and then those that have the rural will be on the sparse, but we will be expanding as we are rolling out and getting more vaccines. The communication is being held widely. Health is communicating quite widely around the issue of the sites and the dates where this is happening, and it is found even in the social media, and social media has been used quite widely. There are also outreach teams that are targeting those specific areas together with our mobile teams that are targeting the vaccines. The registration for 60 areas or over, which has started now for over 60, was launched by the minister. And there are options, which means they are unstructured, one where we use the unstructured supplementary service data, which does not require data airtime. I think this is very important in our communication because we need to be able to say, how do we assist that everybody is able to, from a technology point, you may need somebody who's able to use it, but also to say you will not necessarily need the airtime to register. I think it's some of the things that we are on WhatsApp based, it's there, and then the website based registration, but also the health facilities are assisting in the district where people can come in and they are able to register. We are, at this point, have looked into our operations. Umasake, you would have mentioned it, and we've gone to say it is ward-based. We've said each ward must go back now and have a plan by the end of this month of saying how are they going to be assisting both from registration and from ensuring that they monitor, in particular the sites. Remember, the sites are in wards. They monitor that we are delivering and our people are also, but we are also adhering to the regulations. By the way, that is going to be very important. And at the same time, find ourselves that we are violating the issue of the regulation. But importantly, the issue of bringing all the stakeholders in OSS, everybody in OSS participates. It's saying each one must find their role and participate. And OSS is ward-based, but it also sits at a local municipality level, at a district level. And that is where they will then account in the district command council to be able to tell us what is happening. Is it happening as it's planned, as the plan that I'm talking about? And then it escalates to the provincial command council. Importantly, I think this is the element where we are saying no one must be left behind. We must reach that go-go, even the one who's alone with the young people. We need to find ways. If we are able to achieve that during elections, we should be able to achieve that during the vaccine. And I think that's the message that we want to be sending out from our strategic level. There are communications that are being done at this point in time in the media, in the social media, but we've also hooking up in terms of door-to-door with our healthcare workers. Resources have been allocated in terms of HR, the teams that I was speaking about, the equipment around the fridges, the transport, the issue of our consumables, and the vaccines themselves. Communication plan, which is in place, as I've indicated, but also still addressing the issue of prevention. We cannot forget to say in this process, let's not lose sight of what we still need to do and ensuring, therefore, that that communication continues. I think here, more importantly, is the issue of advocacy and civil society's role in playing that part of advocacy and ensuring that we continue on this. As I'm wrapping up the issue of monitoring, directly from the Department of Health, there is a monitoring that they are doing on a daily basis through the departmental set structures. They do have interdepartmental vaccination coordinating committee, which is chaired by the HOD. They have the technical committee, and we are participating in that committee, even from the Office of the Premier perspective. But also the Office of the Premier itself, in terms of monitoring the vaccine response, because that is what we've been tasked from a multi-sectoral point. Therefore, even the vaccine rollout will be monitored, including DPME, the Department of Planning and Monitoring and Evaluation in the presidency. This week, just to make it practical, DPME is down on the ground with all the stakeholders from Monday, with all of us, and we've been visiting the sites just to see what is happening, but also linking up with the GCIS, where we are then communicating through the community radio stations, just to ensure that people understand that we are on the ground, we are monitoring, we are ensuring that we are rolling out. The Provincial Command Council is sitting, and they are obviously we're looking closely in terms of the implementation plan that has been presented from health, and looking at the overall response in terms of the accountability. To also monitor, and we will be on the ground to monitor that level. Whilst I close by saying, whilst the actual implementation is driven from the health side in terms of the vaccination, but you can then see that the entire response is plugged in a multi-sectoral, and each and every one of us must play our role in terms of the response. The targets, the sites, the resources have been provided in terms of the implementation plan. And from the provincial side, we as a province will be playing our role in monitoring, but I also want to say even national departments, including DPME. In this province. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ndlovu. You were going in and out here and there, but we really captured the essence of what you were conveying. Bishop, Dr. Ndlovu is saying that the door is open, and it will be for you to decide how you're going to fit in, what role you want to play, but the door is open, and you can very easily do it at that local level of the ward, the Operation Sukumasaka local municipality, and escalating it into the command councils at district and so forth. But let me introduce Bishop Thulan Msomi. He holds a diploma in labor law and master's degree in theology and community development. He's got more than 15 years of experience as a traditional health practitioner, and he is currently the president of the Traditional Health Practitioners Business Council, and also champions the church economy under the organization, the South African Religious Forum. And he's also part of the eThekwini Interfaith Committee. Bishop, you are most welcome. We're very honored to have you. I would like to give you about 10 to 15 minutes to really tell us about what you see as the role of the traditional health practitioners, and also what is it that has been happening and what do you think can happen. As you can see, the Office of the Premier is saying that the doors are open from that governance perspective. Thank you very much. You can unmute and go ahead, Bishop. Thank you. Kurt, if you can unmute Bishop, I'll appreciate it. Kurt? Yeah, there you go. Bishop, I can now hear you.
So
Yeah. Yes. Thank you very much, Prof. Greetings, everyone. Good afternoon to the panelists and those who are viewing. Let's first start by saying thank you very much to be part, or to be called to be part of this webinar today, to put our views forward as a sector of THP. As a sector, we welcome all engagements. We are in engagement nationally, provincially, and at district level in trying to contribute to this issue of COVID. As much as we do have our concerns, firstly, we feel as THPs that we are outside from the system of government. When we're saying we're outside from the system, we're not treated like the pharmacist companies, like the doctors in that level. By the way, we're not saying we want to be called doctors. It's okay if we're called THPs, but our level of work and understanding, it's more or less the same. Now, the system itself, we are not within the system. Therefore, government will find it hard to work with THPs because they don't understand the system itself. The sector itself, we are 80% not educated because of the spiritual world that we are in. It allows us, it puts us to a situation where we find ourselves not going to universities or to other institutions. But let's come to the issue of the vaccine itself. As THPs, we welcome the call. We are not against the issue of the rollout of vaccine, and we want to be part in the process to contribute in making sure that South Africa are safe, because it's one of our priorities that South Africa must be safe, and whatever that we give to the people of South Africa, it should be something that went to the lab and checked, and so that it can have a track record. Now, the rollout of vaccine, we appreciate it. Firstly, we are going to be part of it, but we do have the concerns. At first, during the lockdown, we never given sanitizers, we never given the PPTs and all those things like other sectors or other pillars of society, they did have it. And worst part of all, we have seen business people being given some amount of money, and the THPs were never given that amount of money to say, guys, you've been closed for so many months, and this is what we think we want to give you as THPs of our country. That on its own, it leaves our sector to be in a situation that really, do we have to continue sitting with government and engaging while government does recognize other pillars of society, but ours, it's been left outside from them. But nevertheless, the issue of a rollout of the vaccine, it's here in the country, and we welcome it. And I think all what government or the KwaZulu-Natal government did for the people of KwaZulu-Natal to create these commanding centers at a district level, and we are moving to a ward level. Yes, there will be our contribution, but it's going to be limited. It's like, yes, we do it for the sake of doing it, but deep down in our heart, we are really not happy. We still need to engage further with about Dr. Ndlovu to say how best we can come up with policies, strategy that will assist the THPs to be able to be developed further. Another part, it will be the issue of even the university itself, the UKZN, what kind of modules that we can develop to assist the sector, because 80% of people of South Africa, they're going to THPs for help. And it's a fact. Why we are saying that eThekwini alone, per annum, were able to contribute to the economy of this country, almost 50 million per annum. Now, it begins to say that if we really have proper policies, a proper platform, will be able to contribute more to the economy of this country, and to contribute more to the safety of our people. Another part, Prof, will be the issue of we can be happy, we will be happy if Department of Health or the provincial commanding center, they can say, give us a space in saying, what do you have as THPs that can assist the society in this issue that we are engaging on. We are looking at that platform that we can be, if we can be given the platform, we can be in a position of saying this is what we have, but it must go to the laboratories and be tested so that it can be given to the South Africans. If you go to chemists here in Thekwini, you find some of the chemists that are using our own medicine now in these chemists. And we are in a position of saying that means somewhere, somehow, we are losing. And we don't want to be seen as a sector that is losing, but we want to be seen as a sector that is contributing to the development of the country and to the safety of our people. Another issue is we would be happy if we can get AMA workshops for THPs so that it will be easier for us when we go to these district levels, when we go to this ward commanding centers, we understand better and we are able to contribute. Now, that's very important for us because, you know, sometimes you go there and they're not like you, Professor, who understands. They're not like Dr. Figile who understands, you know. Some of the people, they don't understand. They say, oh, automatically. It's because of the system itself that puts us aside, and the people now, they follow that route. Now, we'll be happy. We're just requesting, Prof, that if it can be the workshops that can be given to the THPs so that we'll be part of the rollout, because sometimes you can't contribute on something that you've seen already is moving. and you just follow behind,
Right.
and will come and say, here we are, therefore, then and leave after that. But if there was a proper consultation from our side, from government's point of view, to say, this is what we are looking at. What is it that do you have as THPs that you can contribute to the safety of our society? Therefore, we would have come with many ideas and many things that we have put it forward to assist the government in this pandemic that we are sitting in. And it's not that THPs they are against the issue of rollout of vaccine. It's the question of clarity that as THPs we need to get more clarity, and say once we understand, we are able to say this is our position, this is our view. I thank you, Prof.
Yeah. No, thank you so much, Bishop. And you've really highlighted a lot of important issues. And, it's almost like, yes, now we are asking this question of how can, THPs play a role in the vaccine rollout? And on the one hand, it's a good question to ask, because then it means that, we see that possibility, we see the opportunity, we see the potential there. But on the other hand, we have not really engaged early on. We have not set up systems for engagement. We have not provided workshops to THPs, even around COVID-19 or even these vaccines. And we cannot really then ask you, what role can you play when we haven't actually given you the information about these vaccines, and we are saying, no, come to the meeting, come to the command council. But when you go there, you're going to meet with people who are trained, who have experience. So that puts you at a disadvantage to be able to then guide from your own perspective to say that, from the perspective of the THPs, these are things that you need to think about. These are the things that you contribute. So there is something missing there. And what you're really raising there is that, yes, you can create a temporary process of engagement, but there is a bigger problem that generally the THPs work on the margins of the healthcare system. They are not necessarily seen as part of the healthcare system. And because they are not integral to the healthcare system, then there are no mechanisms to engage continuously. There are no mechanisms to provide relief and support when you encounter situations like COVID-19. And therefore, it just makes it difficult to then do all the other things. And we cannot then just wait right at the end and say, well, now we need THPs to contribute, when all along we have not provided the necessary support. It needs to be a two-way process of ongoing engagement. So I hear you, and I think that you've really raised important issues here to say that, yes, it is good that government has opened up this opportunity for a multi-sectoral response. It's good that there are opportunities to engage at local level, district level, but we do need to then think about how we make this something that is sustainable, not only for THPs to feel like they're just being used at the end when something has already been moving, as you were saying. Why are you coming to us with something that has been moving all along? You are not talking to us. But let me thank you for that contribution and invite Professor Nceba Aleni, who is going to talk to us about issues relating to the contribution of THPs and the fight against COVID-19. He made it very clear that he is not going to speak on your behalf, Bishop ST, but he's going to speak as a scholar on this subject of THPs in traditional medicine. And he is a professor at the University of KwaZulu-Natal and a researcher at the Africa Health Research Institute. Many people will know Professor Nceba when it comes to issues of traditional medicine. He is a lead thinker in this country, both from the medicine perspective and from the practitioner's perspective, many aspects of it. I mean, I don't even know what to summarize there, Prof, because there's just so much that you have done. But also, I think that you have a strong kind of standing in terms of engaging traditional healers themselves, you know, on their terms, and also in terms of engaging policymakers. So I'm therefore hoping that you can take this discussion and concretize it for us, so that when we now move forward, we can know what steps to take. And Dr. Ndlovu is here also, will be listening. Thank you very much. Please take it over.
Thank you, Chair. I hope you can see my screen.
Absolutely, yes. That's it. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Greetings to fellow panelists and the participants who are here. And it's a privilege to have been invited to contribute to this meeting. Thank you for protecting me, Chair. Yes, I'm not a THP. It's an area of research for me. And I've been very much welcomed by the THPs in working with them, and I don't take it very lightly. I think must start with these words that COVID-19 brought a war onto the world. But I would just say that for us as a country, probably they say hindsight is the best teacher. We never prepared an ammunition to fight by investigating on our local vaccine development capacity and search for evidence-based cures. And I say this because we have excellence in various aspects of medical science, social science in South Africa, and they've been providing great advice to the country. But you would not rely only on lockdowns, non-pharmaceutical processes, without medicines to treat sick people, without preparing for a vaccine. And that's where I'm saying our response, for some reason, lacked foresight in this aspect. I think the Department of Science and Innovation, and I will talk briefly about those things later on, the government of KwaZulu-Natal, where there was a little bit of focus on this aspect of the fight. I must state that. Now, the government here in KwaZulu-Natal developed an indigenous knowledge-based strategy to help mitigate COVID-19 and complement current biomedically-based efforts. This included the evaluation of local traditional medicine. And they had this statement that we have to create a new normal by placing IKS at the center of recovery and reclaiming of our health, livelihoods, culture, and economy. Now, African traditional medicine, as millennia, is old, probably the oldest system of healing in the world. And they've relied on traditional medicines and traditional health practitioners to fight these pandemics. So it always begs the question, why would they have not been consulted at the beginning and to be part of the solution rather than decisions made on their behalf? That's what has been a problem. And this is the inequity that we've already known. We know South Africa is such an inequity. And in terms of the poor, the haves and the not, but there's this equity of health profession where other health professionals are regarded probably on a better pedestal than our traditional health practitioners. That then forces, it should have forced us at the beginning to look deeper into ourselves and increase our solidarity, that everyone has a role to play in this in a very meaningful way. And so we have not learned from HIV. I'm just using that because we had a similar problem where traditional health practitioners got labeled with people that are spreading myths, they're spreading HIV denialism. There were miracle cures sprung up, some with political support, though there was no evidence. And science was perceived to be slow, if not necessarily blocking. And that then impacts on the funding of the sector, that they could have brought some solutions on the table. And it also militated against mobilizing the sector for public good. And the healers are always there for their people, for their community, and they would sacrifice for the benefit of their people. But they do need to be treated with respect. So what has happened, since this has happened? Of course, we have heard the bishop say that they've been complaining of not being consulted and their own clarity. And they were at times left to the wolves by law enforcement agencies when they were trying to go and just get some medicine to treat someone. Clearly, they have, even now, their clients still rely on them. Pharmacies were opened, informal traders of medicines were closed. They were not allowed to operate. Then you ask yourself, where are you going to buy your medicine if you don't have a permit to go to the bush to go and collect medicine? So it took a while before that matter was clarified. And even now, as the bishop said, there's a grudge in accepting that they are part of the forefront of vaccine. They view this maybe as a public relations exercise, not a genuine engagement commitment. Now, I've put this plant here because there's been a response at an international level. WHO, Africa CDC, the AU Commission have joined in a push for traditional medicine research in Africa. And of course, this became a response to Madagascar and the COVID organics and other presidents that joined the chorus. And so they established a panel that set up a clinical protocol similar to the Solidarity trial. The challenge with this is the fact that other African countries don't have numbers of COVID positive patients like we have in South Africa. And thus it needed to be a multi-country, multi-center clinical trial, which becomes a bit complex and at times bureaucratic. The WHO and the National Department of Health, of course, set up guidelines around prevention and early detection, clearly realizing that THPs will still have many clients during this pandemic. It is important that they protect themselves and their clients from infection by strict adherence to appropriate health measures. And the THPs are saying these PPEs and these things we were not provided. The education around the symptoms of COVID-19. And the challenge here was that how do you then make that education virtually? Because everything shifted to virtual, where not many healers have airtime, data, and state-of-the-art cell phones and laptops and gadgets. So it becomes quite tricky to say, how do we do this and ensure that they themselves are protected and their families and the work they do. And the part of this thing is the fact that COVID symptoms are varied. They vary from individual to individual. So there's no one size fits all in general. And so that one needs to be aware. So might think I can deal with this symptom, yet someone might become serious very quickly and need hospitalization. And so part of this then education was to then say, what ways can we cascade this? And it's still a matter that we need to, as a country, find this concept of rurality, this concept of those who have and we don't have systems that deal around emergencies and pandemics to say, how do we spread information quickly in a language that people understand and that they can equally participate with knowledge, full understanding. And the one area, of course, that's been a concern is one, there are serious health symptoms that people need hospitalization. But the other matter was the fact that because traditional medicine is oral in nature in this country, there may be people who are relying on traditional medicines. A lot are doing so. And so we do not know what successes, if any, there are, because those things are not documented in the system that we do. But clearly, healers are important in health promotion. They've got lots of clients where we can train them, as the bishop is saying. They need training to understand even the vaccine. The science of the vaccine is complex. And they need to be informed such that they can play their role in leading in society. And also in terms of collaboration with scientists. And healers did respond by canceling all of the rituals and ceremonies that needed to be there. When the beaches were closed and dams and rivers were closed, they complied into those things. And so what's been the response without the health sector was that science and innovation, the minister announced that the department is joining the fight and set up a research team to repurpose South African indigenous plants against COVID. And that work is ongoing. The consortium includes healer associations and a number of research institutions in the country. And there's kind of a value chain approach to the research. But to be honest, the funds are a drop in the ocean. They become sometimes a joke. You can't do more than just screen, which is not adequate to do this work. Just the government of KwaZulu-Natal now set up a strategy that, as I said, complementing the medical responses. And it's Afrocentric, it was grounded, and realizing that people are desperate. They need to, instead of waiting for a vaccine, if you remember last year, vaccines were nowhere near, there were no cure, and people were very anxious. And then it brought a number of stakeholders, including government departments, to respond. What I just want to highlight here was that at the center of that was the recognition that mental health, everyone is worried about the vaccine, but people's mental health was much of a concern. GBV being a problem, spirituality, and who else can you bring than the traditional health practitioners themselves? Churches were locked, were closed, people were not going to church. And also, what would be the enabling and ways to impact on the community? And it's one of the reasons I salute what KwaZulu-Natal initiated, although it still has its own limitations at government level. And there was also a sense of we need to build in this momentum to kind of create a legacy for IKS within the province, and so to say, so that those deliberations are ongoing that need to be. And of course, issues of land and that are critical. And it's an ongoing discussion in South Africa, but people need access to land for their own sustenance and sustainable livelihoods. The Premier launched a lab for the Department of Agriculture and Rural Development, which was going to be doing also supporting the research. in this field, which was important initiatives. We are having to look at how to move from just screening things, but to really get to a clinical trials. COVID is an emergency. We still do not have a cure. We don't know how many people in South Africa are going to consent to be vaccinated. So we need the vaccine, but it's a free will. People will choose, but we need to have alternatives again to look at this. And so there's a work that we are partnering with the MRC and the RE and UKZN to look at moving at this. And of course, alongside this, if you're talking traditional medicine, is that we don't need to have medicines harvested from the wild. That's dangerous to our environment. So we need also another program of cultivation to sustain our environments, create jobs, and so that the legacy of COVID changes our economic landscape in a big way. So in conclusion, traditional healers continue to play a vital role in the health of our people. They are collaborating with research institutions to find treatment, and we're of course watching this space with keen interest, what's going to come out. They have been included as frontline healthcare workers in this vaccine program, and which I think we celebrate. And it is my fervent hope that the healers, for the good of our people and the country, will support the rollout of vaccination. And because this is in line with the concept of disease prevention. So it's not foreign to traditional healers. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you so much, Prof. Really, really appreciate it. That's really amazing. And I think that it's a good point that indeed we did have that open criteria to include THPs in the Sisonke study for vaccines. But I think that it's true that this needs to be seen in the context of continued engagement and education around the vaccines themselves, the science of the vaccines. So let me take this moment to invite Mr. Mohammed Hussein Suleiman. He's a third-year medical student, a global health advocate, very, very passionate about healthcare in general. And he's already has a degree in pharmacy, I understand, which he passed summa cum laude. Well done. But in this case, we would like you to talk to us about, from a student perspective, what do you think of all of this? And I'm going to then hand over to Ms. Nomazondo to essentially take the Q&A for us. Thank you so much. Go ahead, Mohammed.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction, Professor Moshebela. And at the outset, I want to take this opportunity to thank the University of KwaZulu-Natal for inviting me to speak on a student's perspective on health practices and the approach to knowledge and beliefs. So I just wanted to express my appreciation and my gratitude for that. So in the first part of my presentation, I will speak a little on current health practices, how they have changed in the time of COVID-19. Because we know that pre-COVID-19, so the health system and the health practice was as such. And so suddenly everything has changed. I will also speak on the approaches that we can use as students and healthcare professionals to acquire knowledge, and some of the belief sets that we may have in the current health system. So here's a brief outline of my presentation, which I will speak for about 10 to 15 minutes. And the first part to touch on perceptions that relate to current health practices. Because as I said with COVID-19, so the landscape has changed. And so everything has changed, from how we communicate, from how we learn. Because we find that for the most part, everything has moved to a virtual setting. And our communication is key when we communicate our knowledge. I'll speak on the effects of COVID-19 on the health system, on health practices. I will then touch on ways or a process to acquire knowledge. Because it's fundamental we speak about this and the learning system, because when we communicate, what do we communicate? We communicate our knowledge, and so it's important that we take our knowledge or that information we take from official and from reliable sources. I will also touch on the belief sets in healthcare. So moving on to health practices, I would like to categorize it into 3 key components. First one being communication. So communication is probably the most important, the most significant, because in everything we do, we have to communicate. So who communicates? And so what do they communicate? Can we trust that communication? And so the second key component is the knowledge that I spoke about. Who do we take knowledge from? And so how do we take that knowledge? Is that information from authentic sources? Is that information verified? And thirdly, I will touch on application, which is probably the most difficult or the most complex, because what we learn in theory may not necessarily apply to what we have to practice in the practical context. So speaking on communication, we've seen in the pandemic in the past, in the past year, that fake news and the fake news and the misinformation, they were rife. We've seen that in social media, it's the widespread circulation of that fake news and misinformation, to the extent that the World Health Organization had to call a special conference, a special meeting to discuss this emerging public health threat. Because on one hand, we have to deal with the pandemic of COVID-19. On the other hand, we have to deal with this emerging threat to our health security. And so the World Health Organization, they called a conference, and so it was the first of its kind. It started in June and July of 2020, and so it carried on throughout the year. And the 4th one, it just concluded Tuesday last week to discuss the strategies to deal with this issue of the fake news and the misinformation that we are seeing. So moving on to knowledge, how do we acquire knowledge? From who do we acquire knowledge? Can we trust the source from which we take that knowledge? And I think as students and as healthcare professionals, we ought to know of the official places we take that knowledge. Why? Because we have to communicate that information and that knowledge to the public or to the recipient. And I choose to say a quote of one of my mentors, Professor Peter Owira, whereby he said something so profound, and I think it's something for our youth, our students, and for healthcare professionals to note. He said that the university, it's not a place of teaching, neither is it a place for learning. Rather, it is a place for the acquisition. So it's how we acquire that knowledge, because our tutors and our lecturers take that information from the literature, from textbooks. They then have to regenerate that knowledge. They have to break down that information into simplistic pieces. And then they have to disseminate that information. They have to transmit that knowledge to the recipient or to the student. And so from this, we can see that this process of acquiring knowledge, it's quite complex and sophisticated, in that there's active engagement from the sender and the receiver, from the communicator, who's the tutor or the lecturer, and the student or the public. And we've seen that, that in society, or in some parts of society at least, that there's a knowledge deficiency. We've seen it in the early parts of this year. There were protest action by people in public in the Western Cape, but also overseas, whereby they were calling for masks to not be worn. So this ignorance or this deficiency in that communication of the knowledge from our students, from our healthcare professionals, we can see it. But also, it will go back to communication or the lack of communication thereof. And so it's our duty as healthcare professionals, or it's our responsibility. And so we must understand the profundity of the responsibility that we shoulder to communicate that information and that knowledge. And we know also that, that with vaccines and the side effects, it's so important that we are transparent, we are honest, and we are open in terms of the side effects that relate to the vaccine. But also, I think it's worth recognizing that no therapeutic agent is without side effects. So we must appreciate it from a public health perspective, that when we take a vaccine, if we were to experience the side effect, it's for the greater good, because the benefits by far will outweigh the risks. So I think that it's important that as healthcare professionals, as the guardians of health, we communicate these in a transparent and in an honest manner. Thirdly, to speak on application, which is probably the most difficult, because what we learn in theory may not necessarily translate to what we apply in practice or in a practical context. And so it's so important that, as students and as healthcare professionals, that we practice and we have more practice on the ground, and that we are on the front line. Because you find that when you apply your knowledge, you tend to release that knowledge into the open. And so in effect, you are making room for new knowledge. And we know that with COVID-19, the information, it's changing almost every day, because tomorrow or the week after, we are bound to learn something new about this virus. So it's important that when we learn and we acquire this knowledge, we apply it, but also we must keep afloat, or we must keep abreast of new developments and the publications in terms of research that is related to COVID-19. Because COVID-19, it's almost as if that it's a moving target with the emergence of new variants. So it's almost as if we have to fix the plane as we are flying in it. So it's so important that we keep abreast with the new developments. And so finally, I want to conclude, should traditional medicines be incorporated in our current health practices? Personally, I believe that if it's proven to be safe and effective, it should definitely be included, because we often find that the argument is, have traditional medicines, and so have they undergone a process of clinical trials, the 4 phases of clinical trials that we know? Have they been subjected, or the results from the clinical trials been subjected to peer review and scrutiny? Have they shown to meet 3 key criteria: safety, the efficacy, and quality? And so by all means, if we can prove that they meet these key criteria, we should incorporate them into our current healthcare practices. And so on that note, I wish to conclude by thanking the panelists, and by thanking the University of KwaZulu-Natal for inviting me to share my perspective on health practices and the approach to acquire knowledge. And I thank you once again. Over to you, Prof.
Thank you so much, Mohammed, for giving us a perspective on your take into how you see things in regards to this topic that you're talking about in terms of how knowledge is actually going to assist us to actually make the right decision going forward. So thank you very much for sharing that with us. So I've got some questions. I think we've come to a Q&A, and I will then address the questions that we've actually received so far in our Q&A. I'll also advise audience to actually make sure that you actually put your questions there in a Q&A and not the chat, so that we can get hold of those questions. So I will be dealing with the questions, and then I'll request the panel members to address the questions that we have received so far. Let me just check quickly what we have. Okay, so one of the questions that I'll deal with is the question regarding traditional medicine. So the person here asked that if we know that there are some South Africans who will opt for African traditional medicine instead of taking the vaccine, what's the government plan regarding this, and also to regulate the prescription or marketing and selling of African traditional medicine for COVID-19? So I think I'll also go to another question before that, so that before I request perhaps Bishop Somi and perhaps any of the panel members to take this questions. The other question also is regards to natural products. So there is a question that refers to, let's see, let me take this one. So Bishop, you've actually spoken about, you've spoken about the fact that THPs are taken for granted, and yet their herbal medicines are later found in the pharmacies. So this in fact, this is from one of our students, Tendai. He thinks this is actually unfair and is asking what steps will be taken by the Department of Health or any other relevant department to ensure that indigenous people's intellectual medicinal knowledge is not stolen. Secondly, what measures are in place to attract them to come and test their herbs or use or whatever equipment they have, and so on. So maybe I think this question will actually cut across various sectors. I'm sure also Njingalazi Ngaleni will also come in here as well. So I'll leave you with those three questions for now, and then see who Bishop Somi do you want to go first, perhaps?
Okay. Yeah. Firstly, you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Firstly, let me say it is sad for us to find ourselves in this position, because we're expecting that government will come on board and prioritize the THPs per se. In the question that when you go to these pharmacies, then you find all these medicines that are there. The reason behind, because our people, some of them, they don't have money, they're poor, and they can't feed their kids. Now, when they meet with these professional pharmacist companies or or shops, it's so easy for them to say, okay, let me give you this medication. Therefore, this is how it's used. End of the day, maybe he or she will get 1,000 rand about it or 500 rand about it. And the guy that is going to use it, he will sell it, and you'll find that he's making a lot of profit around it. That's why you are saying if we have a proper system that will be able to address such issues, because ours is to say we need government to come on board so that we'll protect our medicines and can be registered and on our names and follow all those processes, and can be tested so that it can be, even government can use it. Now we don't have such facilities, we don't have resources. Since we're outside from the system, we're only looking at UKZN. Thank you very much, UKZN, for allowing us to come and test some of our medicines in your laboratories. But we still need more engagement with government in saying how best we can protect what we have, because it is important for us to protect what we have. And end of the day, whatever that we sell, I must benefit from it. I must not sell it because I want to take my kids to school. But end of the day, let me sell it and take my kids to school. And my kids, they can use it, under my, they can use it for future purposes. And I think for us is to look at it that how best we can come up with systems that will protect what we have as South Africans. I thank you.
Thank you so much. Prof?
The question relates to these regulations. And for a long time, this was a function of the Medicines Control Council, which has now become SAPRA. And so SAPRA, for the first time, have established a task team, a working group, to begin to generate regulations for the registration, marketing, and distribution of the African traditional medicines. So it started just, it's a new task team. Its work has got a deadline of February next year, hopefully when things can be discussed and regulate, gazetted, and all the process. So for a long time, this has been a stumbling block in African traditional medicines in South Africa. So people are selling medicines, but they go as cosmeceuticals, alternative medicines, and stuff like that you find in pharmacies and stuff like that, but they're not regulated as traditional medicine. But there's a relationship that is not as medicines, the healer-patient relationship. So where patients are consulting with their traditional healers, and the healers prescribe and dispense medicines to their patients, that is the jurisdiction of the council. So that is a different relationship. And so that's where South Africa is at the moment. We're way behind many countries in Africa that are regulating their medicines.
Thank you, Prof. Dr. Ndlovu, you want to come in on this one, or should I continue with the questions?
I think I would just want to echo a few things. One area to say, we do recognize as government that we have not really supported in terms of our indigenous knowledge system. We look at it in totality, from the entire system. And I think when Prof was mentioning that there is a strategy, the first part was to say we need to develop a strategy in the province of KwaZulu-Natal, which is driven at the highest level. And traditional medicine is one of them. But also in that strategy, we are also saying there's an economic spin-off of this work. Therefore, we need the Department of Economic Development to be on board and in the strategy there. But the third part is that you therefore, from an implementation point and the resources need to allocate. Hence, Premier himself went and opened that laboratory where we are saying we need to be investing in our own systems and be putting money, ensuring that we need to develop them. So listening to the discussion, I think there is a bit of communication that I think we are not reaching, because the traditional health practitioners were part of that development of that strategy, and they are part of the system of trying to bring that work together. So it's something that is why we say, let's continue these conversations and engagements, because in the process, you'll get to plug in on the systems that are happening. Same thing with the gap around the COVID-19. I don't think we as government did not see their role at the beginning, but in terms of how we responded initially, there was a knee-jerk in the initial phase, realized that we need to bring everybody on board. I think that is how even the impetus was given into that indigenous knowledge system strategy, because we then realized that we don't even have something that guides us. But the third part is that we realized as well that from even PPE side, there is no support. So one of the ways we, as from the OTP side, engaging with health, was to look for resources in Global Fund, we were looking for resources everywhere to assist us. And we then, engaging with the THP as a sector, we were able to say, how much of them can we support? But I do think, because I come from a governance side, the issue is the sectors, and this is where we find sometimes a challenge. You are talking to this group is not talking necessarily to this group. And it's something that from the Office of the Premier Governance, we've realized ourselves, and we are bringing in the different people, because there will be people who are representing the sector within our multi-sectoral responses. And you find then other people are not in that response. So I think from a governance point, that is why one of the engagement we've had directly with health is to say, can we look at this sector and ensure that we use maybe the health ones who are sitting and governed in health, because when they bring their representatives into the Office of the Premier from a multi-sectoral point, they may be missing the ones missing in the camp. So I think my take-home message, because there's a take-home message, is that while all these systems are being done, while there's a strategy, maybe there is a bigger discussion that we should have around the representation and the structures that are representing. And I'm happy that Prof. Ngceba is here, because he's part of that work from the IKS, and he's also listening in terms of the outcry that people are outside, and how do we go back and enhance and ensure that from what we are trying to create, we make sure that everybody is inside. But I would want to repeat, ours is to make sure from a governance side that everybody is on board and we listen. There are policy gaps, we agree, and I think as we are indicating, it's things that we ourselves as government are advocating from a policy side that we need to address. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Ndlovu. I'm going to take another few questions, and then we can sort of come to an end because time is not on our side. So if you could bear with me quickly, some of these are actually comments, like the one that talks about the THPs and church leaders. They need to assist Department of Health with education to win public interest to vaccinate. I also have another comment or a question about how long will it take to establish these platforms for the THPs, because people are dying daily. There's another question for Bishop. I think, is it possible that the perception is that COVID-19 is an illness that is not regarded as one that could be treated within the traditional healing system? Could that be where the lack of engagement is coming from? Another one, from the THP's perspective, why are traditional medicine have to be researched when we know that they have been used by Africans long before Western medicine was introduced to Africans? And for you, Prof, you could perhaps talk about the impact of COVID-19 in the compliance treatment of people living with HIV. I think that those will actually the only questions I think we're going to take, and then I'll also ask you to sum up the discussion so that we can come to a close. So thank you so much. I will ask Bishop again to lead. Thank you.
Thank you again. I think the question why our African medicine should be researched. I think the time, the timing, the issue where we are right now. We have an issue of a fourth industrial revolution that is coming on board, and it puts us to a position where one needs to say we can no longer give people medicine. We need to prioritize. Firstly, we need to do the research. We need to test them, they are correct. And we need to go on these processes. And we need to have some policies in place that will guide us, so that it's not going to be manipulated like people the way they're doing. Yes, in our sector, we do have some problems that we are facing. We have cases that gone beyond our beliefs, and I think as a sector, it is correct for us to do more research, because you have some of the plants that you can never grow in KZN, but can grow in Northwest. And when you bring them from Northwest to KZN, we need to do some tests, and so that we'll be able to make sure that whoever uses it's not going to have some negativity. By the way, we on the side of us as a sector, we are willing to engage more in terms of how best we can grow our economy, because this is our identity as South Africans. And we want to make sure that we are part and parcel of making sure that South Africa is safe in all medicines. And South Africa, all of us together, we are able to contribute to the economy of this country. As I've indicated earlier, that us, Durban alone, per annum, the round figure, it's almost around 50 million that we are contributing to the economy. Therefore, it begins to say, government, come on board. Let's look at the policies. Let's look at how best the strategies that we can put in place, so that everyone is going to feel that we are contributing, as all of us as South Africans. We are fighting these things together.
Thank you, Bishop Msomi. I'll move on to Professor Nceba.
From research I know, because the lockdowns never affected the health centers at the distribution of ARVs per se, there's been not much difference of access to those who require them. what has been noticeable was really issues of children, because I think parents were always concerned about taking them to clinics and things like that. That's been there's in the first 2 stages of lockdown 5, stage 4, that was a very serious impact on children, not much on adults from my experience. But COVID generally would affect anyone, because if you are infected yourself, not because of the lockdowns, you still have to self-isolate or self-quarantine, depending what stages you are. And clearly, if you are in that stage, you still needed medicine and you don't have a support system to help you access your treatment, those probably could have been affected. We don't know yet what implications of that would be in terms of either resistance or what. But when people are virally suppressed, you hope that even if it's a short time, they'll remain suppressed once they get back to their treatment. But we still wait to see those. I've not seen a study saying something else.
Thank you, Prof. Dr. Ndlovu.
Thank you very much. I think my closing remarks will be mainly to say, look, with all the gaps in our policies, in our systems, in our implementation, one thing that we are committed to is to ensure that we work together in this province and ensure that we really get everything that needs to be done, including where we see the gaps we admit, and we are able to say, what can we do? So the issue of those engagements, let's continue, and I think we are available to facilitate that from the Office of the Premier perspective and ensure that everybody continues to be engaged and to be connected, because I think at the end it's about being connected and knowing exactly what needs to happen. Lastly, I think once we've done that, the rest is easier, because you then know where people need training, where people need support, you know exactly in which systems and where do you plug them in. So let's continue doing that, and thank you for this webinar. And I hope we will, even outside of this platform, be engaging. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ndlovu. Mohammed, I would like to invite you just to give us your closing remarks.
Thank you very much. I think I wanted to touch on the question, the importance of the clinical trials. I think it's important that for traditional medication, we have to subject them to that highly regulated process of the 4 phases of clinical trials, because there has to come a time where, if we have to use something, we have to prove that it is both safe and effective. So from a research perspective, I think it's important that we can prove that. But I think to also touch on the question from the student, it's important that we find a way to incorporate this topic in the curriculum that's at an undergraduate level. So the College of Health Sciences tries to incorporate these discussions, and perhaps even like a subject that speaks to the importance of traditional medicines. So I think that as far as the university is concerned, or if a recommendation can be made for the College of Health Sciences, is to find a way to speak more on traditional medicines. But I think all in all, this discussion, it will continue. It's an ongoing debate, and I want to thank the panelists and the university once again for facilitating this important discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mohammed. Before we close, I think I must mention that Prof. Mashabela had to rush to another engagement, so he's not with us now. So I'll close by also acknowledging Roshila's comments that she sent before. She spoke about the School of Chemistry and Physics, whose role is to provide a scientific basis for the ethnomedicinal use of plants by isolating and identifying the bioactive molecules. So she also agrees that the THPs sector have been obviously sidelined, and in response to the pandemic, especially in response to the pandemic, and UKZN and THPs should be more proactive in initiatives or giving traditional medicine a stronger voice. So, which was actually what we're trying to do today. So, researching traditional medicine is vital, and we at UKZN can provide the expertise to support THPs and ethnomedicine. So, this is a commitment that is made by Roshila. So we will find her and hold her to that. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think you've heard our panelists. You've heard the challenges that they're experiencing as well, especially with the THPs. There are so many challenges in the sector, and it is clear that we actually the engagement need to happen between government and universities as well as the Department of Health. So this conversation is actually, it's an ongoing conversation. You heard about what Prof. Ngaleni is actually doing in terms of research and working, with traditional healers. So there's still a way. There's still a long way to go, but at least there's some work that is actually happening. So we really appreciate the insights, and we really appreciate all our panelists for being here and actually assisting us in unpacking the issues that we were discussing this afternoon. So I would like to thank you all of you for making the time to come and discuss this important aspect of COVID-19 response with us. So we had people also, I'm also excited that people were engaging. Unfortunately, we can't take any more questions. So the webinar will be also uploaded in our on our YouTube channel later on, so you can go back and view it or share it with other people who couldn't make it. We also appreciate all the members of the media who were able to join us this afternoon, and we also appreciate everyone that actually attended this webinar. And I'd also like to thank the team who organized the webinar. Rakshika, Shakila, and Pam, as well as also our ICS, who's actually assisting us to actually broadcast this via YouTube. So it's important that we actually continue with all the conversations, and also people are asking for email addresses and whatever. You can actually contact us, then we can provide that information in case you need to discuss any matters further with a specific member of this panel. Again, thank you so much, and please continue to follow all the protocols and stay safe. And thank you everyone for being here, and have a good evening going forward. So this brings us to the end of our webinar this afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.